In Burkina Faso, under the leadership of Ibrahim Traoré, something unseen was unfolding beneath the scorched red soil, a silent revolution shimmering like dust in the twilight. West Africa, long shackled by foreign influence and neocolonialism,
stood on the brink of a seismic awakening. Hidden in plain sight, the gold mines, veins of untold wealth, whispered a forgotten truth about Africa's future.
For decades, these riches were siphoned away, not for the African people, but to feed distant empires and faceless corporations. This is not just politics. This is a fight against neocolonialism. Under Traoré's military leadership, the coup attempt of yesterday had transformed into an African revolution of today. Across Burkina Faso, murmurs of African unity echoed through markets, barracks, and boardrooms alike. Young soldiers, representing the youth in power, carried both rifles and dreams, determined to reclaim what history had stolen. The world's eyes, dulled by centuries of misinformation, failed to see what was rising, an African awakening. A new chapter, forged in defiance, laced with danger and driven by dignity. Ibrahim Traoré, the revolutionary leader, was moving chess pieces that many didn't even know existed. Africa is rising. This is the awakening. This is Ibrahim Traoré's revolution. Weeks after Ibrahim Traoré's rise, a discreet meeting unfolded in the marble halls of Ouagadougou's Ministry of Mines. Sitting across from a young Burkinabe official was Charles Renard, a senior executive from a powerful European mining conglomerate. His tailored suit, silver cufflinks, and cold stare dripped with decades of entitlement. Renard, fluent in the language of contracts and control, believed Burkina Faso's gold and its future still belonged to the West. With a smirk that barely concealed his arrogance, he slid across the table a renewed 20-year concession for exclusive mining rights. His voice, calm and dismissive, echoed through the room. Burkina Faso lacks the infrastructure and expertise to manage such vast operations alone. Let's not pretend otherwise. His words, sharp and calculated, cut deep, an echo of centuries of anti-colonialism struggles. In that moment, Renard embodied the ghost of foreign influence and neocolonialism, believing that this, too, would be another silent victory. The young official, whose name history might forget but whose defiance would not, lifted his gaze, unshaken. Around him, quiet glances from local staff hinted at brewing tension. They knew the stakes. They knew this was no longer about contracts, but about African independence. Yet Renard, blinded by years of unchecked power, failed to realize who was truly behind the walls of this ministry, and how far Ibrahim Traoré's vision for Africa's future had already advanced. The air in the Ministry of Mines thickened as the clock struck noon. Outside, the distant rumble of engines approached, deliberate, unwavering. Within seconds, the heavy doors of the conference room swung open. Marching through in crisp, olive-drab uniforms came the elite guard of Burkina Faso's military leadership. Their insignias, emblazoned with the emblem of the new revolutionary government, reflected under the harsh fluorescent lights. At their center walked Ibrahim Traoré himself. Dressed in understated fatigues, with a calm yet impenetrable expression, Traoré's presence swallowed the room whole. The weight of African politics, Pan-Africanism, and youth in power converged into this single moment. The murmurs silenced. Charles Renard's confident posture fractured as realization dawned. This was no ordinary negotiation. This was not the Burkina Faso of yesterday. Without a word, Traoré laid a single document on the table, the official decree of nationalization. The creation of the new state-owned mining company, forged to reclaim African wealth for African people. The contracts with Renard's conglomerate were terminated effective immediately. His empire, built on extraction and exploitation, crumbled in the span of a heartbeat. This is not just politics. This is a fight against neocolonialism. Renard's face, once carved in arrogance, drained to ash. The foreign influence that once dictated the terms of Africa's future had met an immovable force. Ibrahim Traoré's revolution was not just in words, it was now law, backed by will and power. Africa is rising. This is the awakening. This is Ibrahim Traoré's revolution. With the stroke of Ibrahim Traoré's pen, Burkina Faso entered uncharted territory. The creation of the state-owned mining company sent shockwaves not just across West Africa, but throughout the corridors of global finance. For the first time in generations, the rivers of gold no longer flowed outward to distant capitals. They coursed back into the veins of the Burkinabe people. Profits once hidden in offshore accounts were now channeled into building roads, schools, and hospitals. Villages that had long been forgotten beneath the dust of foreign machinery began to see the shimmer of opportunity. This was not charity. It was justice. Traoré's government made clear that the wealth belonged to those who had toiled beneath. The sun, not those who dictated from glass towers. African unity was not just an idea. It was becoming a tangible reality. The youth in power, engineers, economists, and farmers alike, stepped forward to manage these resources. Through community councils and national initiatives, gold revenues were reinvested locally, reducing poverty and igniting a quiet revolution of dignity. Across Burkina Faso, the phrase "Ouro africano para os africanos" became more than a slogan. It was a lived truth about Africa's future. Yet, as the streets of Ouagadougou buzzed with cautious optimism, beyond its borders, old powers were watching and calculating. The rise of African independence was inspiring. It was also threatening to those who once profited from Africa's silence. Africa is rising. This is the awakening. This is Ibrahim Traoré's revolution, as news of Burkina Faso's bold nationalization spread. The capitals of the old world stirred with unease. Paris, London, and Washington, centers long accustomed to dictating African politics, convened closed-door meetings. Their diplomats spoke in measured tones, but behind polite facades was clear alarm. Ibrahim Traoré's revolution was contagious. If one nation could reclaim its wealth with such precision, what would stop others? Across West Africa, murmurs of Pan-Africanism and anti-colonialism began to echo louder. Official statements from international bodies cited concerns over investor security and regional stability. Sanctions, diplomatic pressures, and veiled threats soon followed. Western media painted Traoré as a dangerous populist, framing the military coup and subsequent reforms as reckless adventures rather than sovereign reclamations. Foreign influence, though wounded, was not yet defeated. It was recalibrating. Inside Burkina Faso, Traoré and his closest advisors understood the magnitude of the storm they had unleashed. Economic retaliation loomed large, restricted access to international loans, trade barriers, and covert destabilization attempts. The coup attempt that had once installed Traoré now seemed like a prelude to greater geopolitical chess. But one fact remained immovable. The Burkinabe people, having tasted ownership of their destiny, would not easily surrender it again. This is not just politics. This is a fight against neo-colonialism. Ibrahim Traoré, the revolutionary leader, had forced the world to reckon with a new chapter, one where Africa's future was no longer dictated from afar. Africa is rising. This is the awakening. This is Ibrahim Traoré's revolution. Amid mounting international pressure, Ibrahim Traoré did not yield to provocation. Where others might have convened press conferences or issued fiery retorts, Traoré chose a different path, one carved from quiet dignity and unwavering resolve. His message was consistent, simple, and steeped in principle. Burkina Faso's wealth is for its people, no more, no less. In an era dominated by noise and spectacle, his silence became its own statement. Rather than confront the West on their terms, Traoré doubled down on strengthening regional alliances. Partnerships with neighboring African nations bloomed, grounded, not in dependency, but in mutual respect and shared vision. The pillars of African unity, once considered idealistic dreams, began to harden into reality. Through strategic dialogues and economic pacts, Burkina Faso positioned itself not as an isolated rebel, but as the vanguard of an African awakening. Internally, Traoré's leadership style embodied the values of youth in power. He delegated authority to technocrats, empowered local communities, and emphasized education and self-reliance. His military leadership was not defined by spectacle but by structure, discipline, and the quiet confidence of a man whose mission transcended personal ambition. This was not vengeance against the West. It was self-respect. It was the truth about Africa, long buried beneath exploitation, finally rising. Ibrahim Traoré, the revolutionary leader, knew that the weight of foreign influence could only be defeated through unity, patience, and clarity of purpose. Africa is rising. This is the awakening. This is Ibrahim Traoré's revolution. Across the African continent, Ibrahim Traoré's actions reverberated far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. From the dusty streets of Bamako to the crowded markets of Accra, conversations ignited, hushed at first, then bold. His defiance awakened, something ancient and powerful in the hearts of millions. For many, he embodied what generations had long hoped for, a revolutionary leader who not only spoke of African independence, but enacted it. In West Africa, where military coups had often been synonymous with chaos, Traoré's disciplined governance reframed the narrative. Young officers and political thinkers began to see an alternative path, one rooted in Pan-Africanism, sovereignty, and economic justice. The slogans of Africa Rising and African Unity left the pages of textbooks and surged into daily discourse. This was more than geopolitics. It was a cultural reawakening. International observers struggled to understand how swiftly the sentiment spread. In universities, social movements, and community gatherings, the truth about Africa was dissected and reclaimed. The idea that African resources should enrich African people gained unstoppable momentum. Traoré's quiet but profound stance had pierced centuries of foreign influence and awakened a pride that could no longer be silenced. Africa is rising. This is the awakening. This is Ibrahim Traoré's revolution. And across the continent, millions now whispered a phrase once considered impossible. We can reclaim what is ours. Under the vast skies of West Africa, where the winds carry both dust and dreams, Burkina Faso stands as more than just a nation. It is a symbol. Ibrahim Traoré, once a soldier obscured by uniform and duty, had stepped into history not with vengeance, but with vision. His revolution was not forged in hatred. It was sculpted in dignity, justice, and unwavering belief in his people's right to rise. As the gold of Burkina Faso shimmered under national control, so too did the hopes of an entire continent. This was no longer just a narrative of military leadership or African politics. It had become a movement of the soul. Across borders, across languages, and across histories fragmented by colonizers, one message crystallized: Africa's future belongs to Africans. Ibrahim Traoré had shown that sovereignty was not an illusion. It was a choice made with courage and clarity, and in that clarity, a quiet justice prevailed. There were no grand speeches of revenge, no parades of humiliation for those who once exploited. Instead, there was silent rebuilding, schools filled, hospitals reopened, and young minds awakened to the power of African unity. The gold, once stolen, now paved the roads of self-respect. Africa is rising. This is the awakening. This is Ibrahim Traoré's revolution.